You are listening to Confessions of a Counselor podcast. Here we will talk all things mental health in bite-sized chunks. Hello and welcome to Confessions of a Counselor. I'm your host, Janice, and in today's episode, I thought we would continue the trend of talking about neurodivergence. And in today's episode, I want to focus on what is happening in the brain, particularly in terms of focus, because I think sometimes this is where some of the stigmas come in terms of neurodivergence and people who are experiencing that and their ability to show up regularly in the world. So the specific thing that I want to talk about today is monotropism. So let's jump right in. This term was coined in 2005 by a researcher named Adaya Murray. Simply put, it's the way in which autistic people pay attention or have intense focus on one individual thing or a specific set of interests. So when they're in this state, they're almost filtering out all of the other information except for the thing that is important to them in that moment. So this is a common experience. But until recently, right, 2005 wasn't that long ago, we didn't have a term for it. So much of what we know about this comes from observing children, but this trait lasts long into adulthood. Oftentimes we were using language like unusual or strange or not quite paying attention or like glassy look in their eyes, right? Like all of these things to describe not focusing on what we're expecting them to focus on. This new term, monotropism, takes some of the stigma out of these other descriptive words of how someone is focusing and what they're paying attention to, right? So it's not that an autistic brain, or even I think this plays into neurodivergent brains, so it's not that they're not focusing, it's what are they focusing on? What is the information that they are observing and paying attention to, and it's not what a neurotypical brain would focus on. So if you think about attention as a tunnel, someone with a neurodivergent brain is going to be very focused. They're focused on what's ahead of them. They are focused very narrowly on what is happening. So as though there is a beam, a light beam, and all they can see is what's happening in that light beam. Anything else outside of that light beam, they are not paying attention to. Whereas a neurotypical brain is going to be able to pay attention to all the different details, right? So even if there is a light beam, they're still going to notice what's inside the light beam, what's outside of the light beam, what's happening at the end, what's happening at the beginning. They're able to focus on more information versus this very strict focus on what is happening in the light beam for someone with a neurodivergent brain. So this can lead to many different impacts and many different ways in which we cope. And so this can lead into social challenges that we typically see in a neurotypical brain, and one that we describe as uninterested or an inability to connect or not making friends. And I think that if we look at it from this perspective of this single beam that I'm focused on, when we're looking at the social challenges that someone with neurodivergence has, it's actually a struggle to switch tasks, right? To switch brain focuses, right? So if the kids are playing in the playground and they're switching from game to game, or they're switching from rule to rule, or they're switching from person to person of the focus of this game, the child who is hyper focused, the single beam, is going to have a really hard time keeping up, switching their focus from now what are the kids focusing on? Now what are the kids focusing on? Now what are the kids focusing on? And this isn't disinterest or selfish or a lack of wanting to participate, but this is having a hard time switching focus, switching what are we doing next? So when we can acknowledge that and understand that and empathize with that, that this is a struggle of switching versus a struggle of connection, then we can show up differently and offer different supports. And with that, even though there is a struggle with this also comes with its own superpower, right? So we've been talking about the superpower of neurodivergence. And this is that hyper focus allows us to complete tasks, to understand something so deeply, to really uncover details or understandings of specific topics, right? So it really gives us that ability to absorb ourselves into something and really, really understand it. So I think acknowledging that it is also a superpower is really important too, right? It can come with its struggles, but it can also come with its benefits. With that in mind, as always, remembering that this struggle to switch attention is not a failing, right? This isn't a human failure. You're not doing something wrong because this is the way that your brain works. It's understanding that this is the way my brain works. And what do I need to support that process of switching attention, of switching tasks, of switching focus? So the two key factors in supporting this process is affect and motivation. So affect is my invested interest in the activity, and motivation is how easy or difficult it is to maintain focus during that. So we will see this often, right? If a kid with neurodivergence is talking about something that they enjoy, they're engaged, they may even look at you in the eyes. They are going to tell you all the details. They're going to know so much. They're very, very engaged and they're highly motivated. So if you ask them to do a task around this activity that they are highly motivated by, then it's going to come easy to them versus tasks that they are not invested in. They do not find interesting. They find this task difficult. And you're going to see a lot more resistance to that. And so can we find ways to incorporate their interests or our interests as adults and find ways to make it easier for us to accomplish tasks? So can I increase the reward of the activity? Or can I find ways to make this task easier for me to understand? So can I increase my affect, or can I increase my motivation, or can I increase both in order to support the process of knowing that my brain is only focusing on one beam, but can I support that process in adding more information into that beam so that it's easier for me? So one other note in terms of social interaction is that this focus on one thing or one aspect or one attention, it also affects our ability to interact with others, right? So if I'm focusing on paying attention to someone's eyes, then I might not notice their smile. Or if I'm focusing on the thing behind them, then I might not notice the facial change of the person I'm talking to. And so this can impede our ability to see body language as a whole, right? To see communication as body language and words, right? Maybe I'm just focusing on the words they're saying and I'm not paying attention to any body cues, right? So remembering that there might be yeah. So remembering that there might be missing information or information that they are not gathering. And with that, I think sometimes the assumption is a lack of empathy or a lack of understanding or a lack of connection. And I want to make sure that we're very clear that this is also a miscommunication on the neurotypicals side as well, because if they were trying to understand how the neurodivergent person was feeling or experiencing or seeing how they're processing differently, then empathy might be met, right? So empathy is a two-way street, and connection happens when we're both putting in effort to make that connection strong. So again, this hyper focus, this monotropism is not necessarily a lack of empathy or a lack of connection or a lack of understanding. It is a way in which my brain is processing. So some of these labels or some of these assumptions about the outward behavior aren't always what's happening underneath for that. So remembering that this is a way of cognitive processing and not a fault of the person. So when challenges arise, we need to look at overcoming them from this perspective. Can I understand what's going on in order to understand what's happening for both the neurotypical and the neurodivergent person? Okay, I hope that you found today's episode helpful and that it gives you a perspective of some of these things that we consider deficits, but are actually just a different way in which the autistic or neurodivergent brain is working. Until next time, take care. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Confessions of a Counselor podcast is available anywhere you like to listen to your podcasts on Apple and Android. New episodes are released every Friday. If you enjoyed today's episode, please join the conversation. Leave a review or subscribe to the podcast hosted on Spotify. You can find all these details on janicelyons.com. Until next time, take care.